All right, cool. What's going on, guys? This is the Red and Black Sports Report, live from WUOG 90.5 FM. My name is Quentin Van Hooser, and I'm joined by fellow beat writers of the Red and Black Sports Report. Red and Black Sports Desk. And we got all things UGA sports coming to you for the next hour. Thanks for tuning in. This is our second episode of the semester. We're going to be talking all things UGA sports. We've got a great show ahead for you guys, or so we think. We like to think. So I'd like to have my host step in real quick. Mayan Patel to my left. Collins switched it up a little bit. He's over to diagonal from me now. It's kind of throwing me off, to be honest. I miss you over here. But we're kind of making room for our first guest of the show today, the man himself. Had to wake up real early. He missed last week. He was
slept through last week's show, but he's here this week.
But he's excited to be here. That's all that we asked for. That's all we want from him.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, let's get a drum roll going for the man, Michael Hebert.
How's it going, everyone? In
Welcome
my defense, I was a little late to the party of planning this entire thing because of some group text mishaps and whatnot. But okay. I'm glad to be here, and I'm ready to talk whatever you guys have for me.
So he's playing the victim early on. Well,
that's right.
Michael is the men's, other than Jed, who was on last week, is the other men's basketball beat writer, and he, along with Henry Queen, our assistant sports editor. But Michael's on to talk men's basketball this past weekend. They've had a tough stretch of games here of late. The biggest one being the loss against Florida on Saturday. Michael, as far as you've followed this team so far, this loss to Florida now, what is your thoughts after this loss and this tough stretch that Georgia's been under and Tom Crean's team has been under?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia definitely knew going into it that it was going to be a tough stretch of SEC games. I mean, no game in the SEC this season really seems like an easy game, save maybe one or two teams in the SEC really aren't, or including Georgia, aren't as competitive. But Florida's, they're not a great team, but they're a decent team. They have players. They shot the ball really well in the first half. Georgia came back and made a little bit of a game of it, but it was just not really enough because of the first half deficit. I mean, Nick Claxton once again had a good game, on the verge of a double-double, which it seems like every other game I'm watching him, he's pretty close to a double-double. But they don't have a true point guard. Total Jackson's a great player, but they don't have a point guard that can run the system that Crean wants to run. And until they get the guys that Crean wants to get into the system, it's going to be tough sledding for a little bit. And I think a lot of people expected that.
Well, the biggest thing so far that I've noticed is this team hasn't played, and Crean's even mentioned it before, how this team, he's not expecting them now or to get 40 minutes of good play from them, but they can't even piece together two halves or even or close to a half and a half, Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it looked like on offense it was tough to even advance the ball at times in the first half, at least when I was watching. I mean, it was tough for them to set up any kind of motion, any kind of plays or anything like sets or anything like that because there was so much pressure on the ball. And I feel like if they have a true point guard, whether it be next season or whenever they can grab one in recruiting, that's going to alleviate some of those problems. But right now they're playing out of position, and they're playing guys that were in Mark Fox's system trying to transfer over 1 year after. It's just not going to be an easy transition. And yeah, I mean, that's what you should expect with this team.
They look really, 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 really rough right now, Quentin. It's bad. I
texted you during the game after, and I'm over here just trying to be optimistic on it and just at least thinking with last week, Collins over here, we're saying we're waiting for that signature win, and so we mentioned, and so Collins probably going to pull up the text right here.
I'm bringing up. I got the receipts.
During the game, I'm texting him. I'm like, man, you spoke too soon. They're about to get the signature win, and then Colin quickly reminds me and says, hey, by the way, Quinn, Florida also sucks.
Georgia basketball.
Yeah. So Quentin here texts me. He says, I don't even know. I'm losing all this. Quentin's off the hook maybe with the receipts. But
thank you. I secretly went in and deleted
He
them because I knew
texts me.
you'd pull this.
Essentially, he says you spoke too soon. They're about to get that signature win. Florida was 9-7 going into that game. Florida's
But
not.
it was on
signature.
TV. That's where I was like, people are going to be watching. That's where it's signature win enough for me. I don't know, Michael. We asked Jed last week. As long you're constantly around the team. You're asking, going to press conferences as far as, and then you release the observations after games. What are some of your observations, your takeaways so far from Crean and just the system that he's implementing, and as far as the culture, that's the biggest thing that Jed was talking about last week. As far as you, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, he's changed some things up. I mean, as far as basketball goes, obviously they're shooting a lot more. Mark Fox's teams weren't known for their offense. They weren't known to shoot the ball. They were known for their defense, which I think Crean's trying to spread it out a little bit more. He's letting players that have different skill sets, be in different situations. The prime example that everyone's going to point back to is Nick Claxton. I mean, because that's the guy Crean wanted when he first came in. That's the guy he talked about. But as far as the culture itself, I mean, I think it's a little more organized. At least,
any key players you're thinking that maybe he's favoring for his system, though?
I mean, Claxton for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think that most of these guys weren't his guys, but he's doing what he can with what he has. And I mean, he's talked about Derek Obede improving his game. But these type of players weren't recruited for this system. They were recruited for what Fox wanted, and it's like putting a square peg in a circle hole, or maybe the other way around: circle peg in a square hole.
How many times have you used that analogy? Too many
that
times
was
at
the
this
first
point.
time, I think.
Oh, there we go. He
Well-
had it. He was waiting for it.
So, Michael, by your estimation, what are realistic expectations down the stretch? Georgia right now, 9-8, a brutal 1-4 opening to conference play. Doesn't get any easier tonight going on the road at 14-3 LSU down in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
LSU undefeated in conference play. So this Georgia team, with the rest of the SEC schedule playing out, some vital games both at home and on the road, what do you think is realistic for both the fan base and the players to expect?
I mean, at this point of the season, you got to kind of expect what you've already seen with this team. I mean, they'll probably improve. They'll probably shoot the ball a little bit better down the stretch. They'll improve in certain areas. They'll improve defensively. They'll improve, with their ball handling and managing an offense. But it's not going to be easy, especially playing LSU. I mean, Texas has had an up-and-down season. They're still a pretty good team that comes in on Saturday, the 26th. And there are a few games down the stretch where I feel like they could probably, surprise some people and win, maybe one or two. So I think 500s was the number. I'd say 500, or maybe a game above or below, give or take. 500.
Well, don't throw away our debate topic too early. Real quick. But
I'm looking down their schedule right now. There's 14 games left. Realistically, I don't know how many games I'd favor them in. I fully expect to be able to count their number of wins in these 14 games remaining on one hand.
That's what I was going to say, too. Yeah. I'm with you on that.
That low on them?
Yeah.
This is a good conference. This is a good conference.
It is.
They're way behind. They were competitive against Florida. Florida's not one of the best teams in the conference, but they played Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky. Those games weren't even competitive.
Yeah.
So,
but at that same time, that's like the upper level, wouldn't you say, at least of the SEC?
Yeah, but looking at the schedule, you got Ole Miss twice, you got Mississippi State, you got Auburn again. South Carolina's only 10-8, but they're 5-1 in SEC play.
Yeah.
You get LSU again, and then you got at Arkansas, you got at Alabama, who's playing well. I don't know how many of these games they're going to win.
Well, I think that leads into where we can kind of get into the topic of, so are we thinking this team finishes below 500?
I mean, yeah. At this point, I mean, you're looking at the schedule. Colin pointed out, too. There's maybe, I'd say 3 games they could win, but that doesn't mean they're going to win those games. They have to come out and play well. I mean, Missouri.
So which games down the stretch are you highlighting that?
Missouri's had an up-and-down year. South Carolina's had an up-and-down year. Let's see. Well, Texas A&M wasn't what everyone thought they were going to be going into the season. They did lose a lot last year, but any one of those games. But those aren't givens, and some of them are on the road, and Georgia hasn't played well on the road either.
No.
I mean, they played really bad on the road. So they could win those games, but, they have to improve down the stretch. They have to improve shooting the ball. I mean, 3-point shooting has been horrific over the last 5 games at least.
I'm not going to rule out them pulling a good upset or two, getting that signature win we talked about. But even then, we're asking if they'll finish above or below 500. Right now, as things currently stand, with what was a fairly soft non-conference schedule, they're only 9-8. It's not like they've got some 5-game cushion to stay above 500. Yeah. You've pretty much got to play 500 basketball for the rest of the year to stay above it. And looking at the schedule, I don't know how that happens.
I'm with him on that, for sure.
Well, as far as just the teams going ahead, who are maybe one or two, though, this Texas game, big one coming up, you'll be at that game covering it. What are some of the things you're looking at in that game? Did you watch Texas? Was it the Matthew McConaughey thing blowing up on Twitter with him in his burnt orange suit? I mean, I don't expect him to make the travel all the way from Texas to Athens for that game. But as far as that game, it's on the big stage, ESPN2 at least, for the SEC Big 12 Challenge. But are we watching the evenly matched team? Right, teams go head to head, or even then?
Well, I mean, Texas hasn't had the best of years. They've had a couple really close games against good competition. Kansas is the first one that comes to mind. They just beat Oklahoma. But they're still a better team than Georgia. I mean, they haven't had a great season, but Georgia is in such a transition mode. I mean, we talked about this with Fox and Crean, and I don't want to go back and dull the point so many times, but Georgia's – it's going to take some time. And if you're a fan of Georgia basketball, you just have to be patient. I mean, you look back at what and I was thinking about this morning, you look back at what Kirby Smart did when he was coming in for Georgia. He had a model of consistency from Alabama. He knew what he wanted to build at Georgia. I think Crean knows what he wants to build. He has models of consistency based off of what he's done in the past at Indiana, Marquette. And you look at other teams in the SEC, you look at what Tennessee's done over the past, 3 years. They go from being, middle-of-the-road SEC team to the number one team in the country. So.
Yeah, last year Tennessee picked to finish 13th out of 14th in the SEC, put together a good run, and then, like you said, on Monday they were named the new AP number one.
All right. So, I mean, you have to have models of consistency, and he's got about a 5-year plan here. And it's going to be tough because Georgia never had that culture of basketball. But I think if he follows the same kind of model that some of these successful coaches we've seen, even at Georgia, they'll be all right. Just got to be patient a little bit.
So patience is what you're preaching at this point. As far as, though, on the team with the roster that they have right now, you've mentioned Claxton before. Do you think at least out of one of these guys, he's got the guy to, carry forward this system, or is at least picking up the system a little bit more?
I think Claxton's made a huge jump from last year.
What about Rayshawn?
And Rayshawn as well. Yeah. Me and Colin watched Rayshawn last year, expecting him to be, a pretty high-profile freshman.
Yeah.
And I think this year we've seen flashes of it, but then we've also seen the old Rayshawn where he doesn't show up in some games. Wouldn't you agree, Colin?
Yeah, they've got some players that are talented. They've got the type of guys that you need to develop. We talked about this last week. Getting the blue chip guy here is not the answer.
Yeah,
those guys are one and done. That's not how you sustain success. Say we've seen Vanderbilt try it these last few years. They've gotten good recruiting classes. They're the only winless team in the SEC right now. So very few schools have mastered one and done. Say we mentioned Tennessee. Tennessee model is not the Kentucky model or the Duke model. They develop talent.
Well, you're comparing all these teams. So who is maybe the realistic comparison for Georgia, not now, but like in a couple of years that you expect playing at a certain level? Are you expecting them once Crean's getting his system going, like to be in the upper level?
The pipe dream is Tennessee, right? Because they're now ranked number one. I feel like that's the same level of program probably. But now they brought back all these guys, they've developed them, and they signed a 5-star point guard this year in Josiah James, so they're going to keep it going probably.
Oh, they definitely are.
But is Georgia going to be ranked number one in the country in 3 years? Probably not. So it's hard to say.
Well, and you made a good point with how the pipe dream is Tennessee. What Rick Barnes has done in Knoxville has not been with these huge 5-star recruits. He's gotten his guys in, has kind of overhauled the system that was there before, and then got the guys to buy into both the culture and his system of basketball. And now it's a team that's playing with confidence levels that is through the roof, and they're just out there having fun, and it shows that they're all really good basketball players with great chemistry. And so I think if Tom Crean can establish that, like Michael said, he's got the 5-year plan that he's trying to get figured out, get the solid base in, then Georgia might be on the up and up. But kind of circling back a little bit to the debate on where the Bulldogs would end at the end of the year, there's a 3-game stretch from February 6th to February 12th at Alabama versus Ole Miss, and then at Texas A&M. And I think to get to kind of that 500 mark, that's a stretch where Georgia needs to win two of those games.
Yep.
Alabama has been a gritty team this year, but very beatable. They beat Kentucky, almost beat Tennessee this past weekend, but they've had spurts where they can't shoot at the free throw line.
They also took it to Ole Miss last night. They're hit or miss.
Exactly. And then with Ole Miss, they started off seemingly flawless in conference play and to the season, and then last night, big loss to Alabama. That game here at Stegman. Maybe the Bulldogs can pull out on top. And then at Texas A&M, who's had an underwhelming season thus far. It's a very winnable game in College Station. So I think to get to that 500 mark, got to win 2 out of 3 of those. But, Michael, I did want to get your thoughts on one thing. So far this season, the guard play maybe has seemed like a little bit of an Achilles heel for Georgia, but I'm looking at the turnovers and can't stop staring at the stats. 16.2 turnovers per game on average.
It's bad, man. I mean, that's one of their worst aspects over this last 5-6 game stretch. I mentioned 3-point shooting earlier, but you can't go into a game and turn the ball over in double digits and expect to win a basketball game. I mean, that goes back to like AAU basketball or middle school basketball, that they teach you that when you first dribble.
Well, why do you think they're turning over so much? Is it just the system that they're just not used to?
Sloppy play. I mean, are they
trying too hard to make the system work with the wrong players?
I wouldn't say. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I just think they're playing teams that are aggressive on the ball, and this team's in a new environment. I mean, it's like a fish out of water type of deal.
Yeah.
They're over here trying to advance the ball down court, and they don't have guys in passing lanes. They don't have this, that, and they try to do too much ISO ball, that kind of thing. But you have to spread things out, and they aren't right now. So.
I've got some shocking stats about the first 5. Our own Jed May, who was on this show last weekend, we have a story up on redandblack.com/sports right now, a statistical breakdown for Georgia men's basketball through their first 5 SEC games, comparing this season to last season. And last season, Georgia had turnover problems that through first 5 SEC games averaged 13.2 turnovers a game. This year's 15.2 through 5 SEC games, just the conference games. Okay, last year they allowed 14.2 points off turnovers in those 5 games. This season, 22.2 off of those turnovers. Only 2 more turnovers, but they give up 8 more points off of them. Whatever it is, they're more live ball turnovers. They're not getting back. Whatever. The turnovers were there last year, but they still weren't giving away this many points.
Yeah, and to go along with that, on Saturday against Florida, a game that Georgia was down by double digits, makes a good comeback, a valiant effort in the second half, but 20 turnovers. That's a hefty margin. Florida scored 62 points, 28 of which came off of turnovers, and Henry Queen has an article up as well from Saturday. It has a quote from Tom Crean, basically summing up what Michael just said. It's lack of being strong with the ball. It's lack of pure decision-making. It's lack of guys who can get their own shot. It's guys who try to make plays that aren't there. And the biggest one is what I said at the beginning. We're not strong enough with the ball. So Tom Crean is acknowledging kind of what's happening, what the weakness is. But, Michael, how do you fix that? Guys aren't being strong with the ball, and they're trying to make shots that aren't there. So it seems like there's this dichotomy between being too aggressive and not being aggressive enough, in the sense that they're being too lackadaisical with the basketball. So what's the biggest fix? Because pulling up from 35 feet and trying to rattle a few threes together doesn't seem like a permanent fix to me. So how do you kind of take that 20 turnovers and slim it down to make these games more competitive?
Right. I mean, you mentioned it, the fine line between being too passive or too aggressive, and there's consequences on both sides of the coin. You're going too aggressive, you get into early foul trouble, and that was something that was back from the Tennessee game when they lost by 40-plus points. I mean, and then you go to the other side of the coin, you're being too passive, then you end up turning the ball over 20 times a game. So you have to find a middle, and where I feel like you have to have that is confidence and trust within the system. And these guys are still young. I mean, they're playing a lot of young guys. Teachon Hightower's a sophomore. They got a couple other sophomores. They have older guys that need to buy into this program and instill the confidence and trust to the whole team. And I feel like once you have that, you run these reps every day in practice. When you get to the game, it's almost like they're just not, I don't want to say forgetting that this is what they're trying to do, but it's like I feel like there's not full confidence and trust that this is going to work game by game.
So I think their biggest issue is we mentioned the lack of a point guard, but I think it's more so you don't really have a player that's making everyone else better on offense, which a lot of times people look to the point guard for that. Say Georgia's leading assist man is Nicholas Claxton. He averaged 2.1 assists per game. But as a team, Georgia's tied for 134th in the country in assists per game.
Yikes.
So when you don't have a creator, someone who can get his own shot or create them for someone else, that leaves it on Tom Crean to try and scheme things into existence. And that's really, really hard to do. So offensively, they've got some guys with potential, like we mentioned, like Claxton and Hammonds, but they're not at the point right now to where they're enough of a threat to make everyone else better too.
Well, riding out that wave, a little bit more of a positivity of seeing some good stuff happen as well on that side. But Michael, kind of what's been so far this season, kind of what's been one of the most fun things you've been able to cover for this team, and what's been fun about covering this team this season?
I mean, this is a young team. It's growing. Things are different. I'll be honest. I was, covering the football team up until, January, so I was a little late on that. But so I was still in football mode halfway through. But, hey, I'm here now, and I think probably things are different. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, the culture is different. Crean is a lively person in a press conference. Yeah. He's a
was it fun interviewing him, asking him these questions?
It's fun. It's long. You got to be prepared to wait around for a little bit. But, things are different. Last year we would have, players just in scrum style like you would at a regular availability after a game. This year, to get two select players to go up on a podium and how you would see it like an NCAA tournament.
Is that Crean, kind of his organization?
It seems like it is. I mean, this is the first I saw of it. I asked Jed and Henry if that's been going on all season, and they said yeah, because obviously I was in football. But
so it threw you off a little bit on your
threw me
first
off
day.
a little bit. But I think this team is.
What is this?
This team is interesting because you're seeing some of the best players emerge that are sophomores. I mean, Derek Obeda is a great player, but he's never been one to take over a basketball game. And, Turtle Jackson the same way. These guys that have been around for a while, they don't have the leadership, but they have young leadership emerging. And I think that's the cool thing about this team is that you might be able to see what's down the road 2 years from now or something like that once you start getting some other guys to come in that can help these guys out.
And you guys, like you, Jed, and Henry, you guys are all having fun together covering these games, though. Like any funny stories?
Other than my laptop dying halfway through.
Wait, what happened with that?
So I have an issue with
because I heard you had like 2 laptops, 3 laptops. Well, yeah. Or are we on like a 5th one now?
So I had a battery issue where the battery is running dry or whatever. Yeah. So I take it out, and so I rented.
Is this like middle of the game or something that dies?
Oh, yes. So I rent one from the MLC. Turns out, I think that was the what game was that? It wasn't Vandy. What game was that? It was a Kentucky game.
It was Kentucky.
So it was a huge game.
Yeah, biggest game in segment so far.
So it dies halfway through the game.
Of course,
halfway through the first half, and so I'm like, oh gosh, I try to whip out my other laptop, and turns out the MLC has all these like things you have to log in, and that you have to be signed into a certain Wi-Fi.
And meanwhile, all the other guys are making fun of you on this one, right?
It happens, yeah. But no, we figured it out and got it done. That was a crazy game, from what I remember. You guys talked about it last week, Ashton Hagens and all that. But yeah, that was a little nuts. But so far, this is my second year covering the team, so I love basketball. So I really enjoy covering this team for sure.
Gotcha, man. Yeah. Well, Michael, do you got a little bit of time, or you got to head to class?
I've got time.
You got a little bit of time?
You got anything else for me?
Yeah, if you want to stick around a little bit, hang out, and we're about to jump into some gymnastics talk. So
yeah,
I appreciate it. We got our next guest on. Drum roll. Glad you're on top of this one, Colin.
I am.
Seems like I caught you a little bit off guard. Still keeping going until we get them out of here. Still going. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining the show. Our next guest up is Augusta Stone. Hello, Augusta.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you guys? All right. Well, Augusta, she is your Gym Dogs beat reporter for the Red and Black. She is killing it, doing a wonderful job, and this Gym Dogs team is fun to watch, aren't they?
Yes, they're a blast. I've had a great time. I actually wasn't a very big gymnastics fan coming in.
No.
I'd never followed it before. Got the assignment in December, and I've just been rolling. I know so much. I've learned so much in the past month, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, Augusta's joined with Tori Heck joins her on the beat, and is there anyone else on the beat?
No, it's just me and Tori.
Just the two of you guys, and so, well, that's an interesting dynamic though, because it seems like Tori does she have some background in gymnastics, or
I don't think so.
So it's
yeah.
brand new for both of you.
Both fresh, yeah.
Gotcha.
I think she has more of an idea than I do.
Yeah.
She tends to know what a round off is from looking up, and I learned all of this from research, and I think she just knows it. But so we're both pretty new. But
well, okay, so when you're getting into these press conferences and you're asking these players, and then Coach Coupette's
Coupette's
Carter.
Yes.
If you're asking her these questions and all that, are you asking kind of a little technical side of it, so you can how has that been a learning experience through? Are these players open to kind of explaining this all to you guys?
Yeah. So it's been a ton of research, honestly.
Okay.
Independent research. I found websites, watching videos nonstop. I figure out they do the same skills across the meets.
Yeah.
So you kind of figure out what it is, and then you know exactly what they're looking for. You want stuck landings, obviously. You want your legs tight. You want to be very just strong. You want to look strong. And so it's been a learning experience for sure. I have more of an idea than I thought I would, for sure. They've been pretty good about speaking technically to me, which I appreciate. But yeah, it's been really fun. I appreciate that they will explain things if I have questions, but I can identify the skills because they don't change it up on me, thankfully. So if you just watch the meets, we're going into the 5th one, so I know what to expect from their routines, and I know what they need to do to stick and stuff like that.
Well, as far as getting in, we'll get into team talk so far. This team's in top 10. What are they currently?
Number 6.
Yeah,
yes.
I was about to say after the Iowa State meet this past MLK Day, and then they had against Alabama on last Friday. And that was awesome. Did you see the little intro video that they did? It was the Friday Night Heights around the Saturday Night Live. Coach Coupette's Carter comes in and says something to extend. What did she say?
Live from Athens, it's Friday night.
Yeah, and they go into the whole little spiel like a SNL thing. So
cool.
It was really cool how the video team and put that all together for the video board. But as far as this team so far, it's a young team.
Yeah.
9 freshmen on it.
9 freshmen. There's 14 gymnasts. So there's 5 returners. They are almost doubled by freshmen. Yeah. Which is wild. It's very, you don't see that a lot.
And one senior, Sydney Sneed.
Yeah, one senior.
Yeah.
Yep. She's the anchor.
I was about to say, speaking on the anchor, so what are some of the dynamics that you're seeing of this team right now with these freshmen, such a young team, and one senior right now? Are there little things that in between each event that's you're seeing and noticing characters and leaders wise?
Yeah, so Sydney Sneed for sure. You can tell she's always just on the sidelines hyping everyone up, for sure. One thing I've noticed, the freshmen themselves, they seem to be very encouraging of each other. There's so many of them, and it's so fun to watch them. They are all going through the same thing. They know exactly what the other one's feeling, and they're on every event. There's a freshman, multiple on some events. So it's very interesting to see how a team can be led by such young talent. I think for sure I think the Alabama meet, the top 2 scorers on bars were both freshmen. You don't see that a lot. You really don't. And so they're having such an impact. But really, the team dynamic, I think, especially coming off, they had a rough meet at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so
Oklahoma's also a top. What?
They're the best.
Where
they're number
are they currently ranked now?
Number 1.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, never mind.
And they traveled to Norman. It was rough. One thing I noticed talking to them after the availability was that the upperclassmen, the 2 juniors and the senior, really had to just lead the freshmen, let them know, you're gonna have down meets.
Calm the pregame jitters.
Exactly. And you could tell they look like a new team after that, for sure.
So it's just having these experiences, because really they're going up against Alabama top 5.
Yes.
And then they're going up in this past 2, 3, 4 game meet stretch.
Yeah.
Right there. So, but as far as for you covering the team though, you have a kind of unique niche of fans for you. So what is it like reaching out and being able to get to the Gym Dogs fans of Athens and beyond? And have you had any people come up and talk to you about say like, hey, awesome, thank you for covering this, and like we love the coverage that you're giving for us?
Yeah, so I haven't had that specifically, but one thing I've noticed is like in my friend circles, I'll tell them I'm covering gymnastics, and they're always like, oh my goodness, I love the Gym Dogs, that's so cool. It's one of those things. I came to Georgia, and I remember when I was on like my freshman year tour, they were like, what do you think the second most popular sport on campus is? And everyone was like, I don't know.
Maybe
and it was
men's basketball?
Gymnastics. Yes. One thing I've noticed
Michael's shaking his head over
is really cool. Stegman, even on like the Monday matinees, it gets pretty full.
Oh, it does.
And,
it's crazy.
Yeah, and all the like, there's so many kids, you know, and their families, and it brings in a crowd for sure, and it's been fun.
Well, it's almost like a family vibe. Everything's family. It's engaging. Coaches are, you know, have the microphone speaking with the crowd, interacting with the crowd, and everyone is interacting with the crowd and wants that to be a part of their score as well. I think was it what's her name? First name? It's slipping my mind. Vega.
Sabrina Vega.
Sabrina Vega. Yes, yeah. So hers is awesome with the Michael Jackson moonwalk, and I saw her do it last year at least, and then now still. I feel like that's just little things to get the crowd going, engaged, and stuff like that.
The crowd engagement helps them out so much too. One thing of note, Rachel Lucas, she's a freshman. She's coming off of the junior Olympic level where it's very individual competition, you know, not a lot of cheering, no one on the sidelines with you. And she mentioned specifically that it's already been hyping her up so much, having all of the energy come up in the NCAA level. So you can see it in her score. She's already scored a 9.925. And I think the crowd atmosphere helps these gymnasts so much. It helps them really like boost up their scores, boost up their energy, loosen up, not be so tight. And a lot of them coming off this individual competition, you can tell that it's already helping them out so much with such a young team, and they really love the atmosphere. And the fans are incredible.
Yeah, well, the guys are being a little quiet over here.
Well, so I wanted to ask you about a tough loss on Friday against Alabama, losing by 0.025, so 25/100ths, and then bouncing back, quick turnaround for a home Monday matinee against Iowa State, and then the team comes out and posts 197. For anybody that might not be well versed, kind of in the gymnastics world, why is that number so important? What's the big deal about 197?
So a 197 means that across all of the events, the Gym Dogs, they averaged a 9.85 across all of the events. That's huge. That's almost a 9.9. Only 5 other teams so far this season have reached a 197. So it's really like showing that you're in the upper echelon of the NCAA. And that's somewhere Georgia wants to be. You know, they haven't been there since Suzanne Yokelin retired. I think it was in 2009. They've been in a rebuilding year. And so they're really coming like back. I think honestly, one thing I've noticed is I think they're maybe, I don't know if the right word is like they're coming out early. You know how they were talking about how the Braves were like ahead of schedule. I think the Gym Dogs are definitely ahead of schedule. They're already hitting that 197 with the 9 freshmen, and it's only Coupette's-Carter's second season. So I think that they're definitely, you know, ahead of schedule for where they want to be. And if they keep it going, if they keep the momentum up, I think we could see them in NCAAs again. And they made it last year after upset against, I think it was Michigan. So I think they can make it without an upset this year if they keep going at the pace they're at. Yeah.
Another question I had, a little more lighthearted. It's Monday afternoon. I'm doing homework. Then I get onto Twitter, and there's a couple people there covering the Gym Dogs meet. And I get a text that the beam has broken, and there is this lengthy delay at Stegman Coliseum because the beam broke. And so what happened? Because I get on my timeline, and I see 3 or 4 tweets in a row that, we're in a delay at the Gym Dogs meet because they need a new beam.
Oh, it was Sabrina Vega?
It was Sabrina Vega,
right after
yes.
her. Funny how I say the Michael Jackson thing, yes. And then that moonwalking breaks it.
So thankfully, she was the final gymnast on the beam. She said midway through her routine, she felt a screw come loose, and then she watched it fall. So she's up on the beam. She's still doing her skills. She finished her routine knowing that part of the beam had fallen.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Did you guys ask about this after? What'd she say?
So she was laughing, which is good, but she said that I think I think I quoted her saying that she was praying while she was up on the beam that it wouldn't fall. And it didn't. But one thing that was interesting was they tried to fix it, and then they realized that they couldn't. So they physically removed the beam. They walked it out.
Oh, they had a full team. There was
yes.
like 5 guys, like grown men just carrying this huge beam out.
Yeah, one of them I noticed was our assistant coach, Josh Overton. He was one of the guys helping them like get the beam out. And then they brought in another one. I was talking to Tori. I was like, do we have another beam that we can just bring in? So I have no idea where I don't know if it came from the practice gym.
Okay.
No clue, but they brought in another one. And then Iowa State, they got, the extra time to warm up because you can imagine the gap in time there. One thing I noticed so it was right before Georgia was to go on floor. And for the floor exercise, you want to be loose. You want to be, I guess it's still serious, but it's supposed to be less serious than the other rotations. And in that 30-minute period where they were like replacing the beam, they were playing music, getting hype. You could tell that they were really loosening up. And so I remember thinking like they're going to have strong floor performances if they're already like this loose. So that was one thing. And then they did. They actually had a great night on floor. I think 3 scores of 9-9 and above. Rachel Lucas breaking her own career best. So you could tell that as odd as it was having the gap, I think it really did help loosen them up for sure.
Looking ahead a little bit, it seems after this stretch that they've had against Oklahoma, Alabama, kind of things slowing down a little bit for them, or as far as competition-wise, who they're going up against. Who are some key matchups to look for in the upcoming couple weeks here?
So in the upcoming couple of weeks, I think Auburn going away, for me, I think that away meets are going to be a true test for this team because having the Stegman Coliseum atmosphere really is going to make the scores higher. So I'm interested to see how they come back. The only away meet so far has been Oklahoma, where they scored the 195, which is just, it's not a score. You want to at least score a 196 every week. The 195 is something they're hoping to drop when the RQS calculation kicks in toward the end of February. So I think trying to post that high score away will be a big one. One matchup I'm looking forward to is when they travel to Florida because Rachel Bowman, she's a freshman. Her sister competes at Florida. Alyssa Bowman. So it'll be interesting to see them compete against each other for the first time. So that's one matchup I'm definitely looking forward to. And then the next week at LSU, Florida and LSU are the only 2 SEC teams ranked ahead of Georgia right now. So that will be an intimidating tough stretch.
The ones to watch for.
Yes, for sure.
So when's their next home meet, you said?
It's February 1st. So not this Friday, but the next.
Gotcha. So you got a little bit of time to a little bit of break instead of having to go back to back after this past weekend.
Oh, it's so much fun though.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I don't mind it at all.
Not at all.
They're a blast.
So as far as any fun stories, we ask everyone if they got inside looks and fun stories that they like to have, or any fun times that you and Tori have had on the covering it so far. Is it just part of the learning experience that's the most fun for you?
Honestly, I've loved learning it. I feel like I've fallen in love with another sport. Gymnastics was never on my radar before I got the beat, and then I was so excited to get the assignment because I know how much gymnastics means to Georgia as a whole. So I knew I wanted to do it justice, and falling in love with a sport, I've been watching old Olympic routines, Courtney Coupettes when she was at the Olympics in 2004. I've just been watching old routines, getting really into it, and I love having found just something else to enjoy, really. And then even like nationally, Oklahoma has Maggie Nichols, and I've become a very big fan of Maggie Nichols. She is an incredible gymnast, and I love watching her routines. So for me, the most fun part has been like falling in love with another sport.
Well, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll have Tori on here soon and talk more gymnastics in the future. But we got to turn the table or turn the page to a little bit more of NFL playoffs because Colin, am I going to get him riled up a little bit? I don't want to. I don't really.
Colin was wrong. Was Colin wrong?
Colin was wrong. No, not really.
Colin picked a Saints-Patriots Super Bowl last week. I know there's all you kids out here who picked Saints-Chiefs who were 100% wrong. So, I was wrong, if not for that. I mean, the Saints got totally hosed. Let's call it what it is. I don't feel that bad for them because they had multiple opportunities to put that game away. But they did get hosed. So, I wasn't that wrong. But, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Well, What was your pick again? What was it?
I picked the Saints in the first game. I was pretty confident about that one. Second one I had is a coin flip. I thought that the Chiefs would be able to pull it out at home, and clearly I was wrong. But I also said that you can never count out TB12 Tom Brady when he's got the ball. And the crazy thing with the Patriots is that against the Packers, against the Falcons, against the Chiefs, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Patrick Mahomes, none of them ever touched the ball in overtime because Brady took them down, scored a touchdown to win the game, which I think is a problem by itself in the NFL overtime rules. But, that first game, the NFC Championship game, that's a little tough with the blatant pass interference. You'd hope that the officials come in and say, hey, I think you got that one wrong, and kind of correct it with each other and huddle together. But like Colin said, the Saints probably would have won the game there, run out the clock, kicked an easy field goal around the length of an extra point, but did get the ball first in overtime. If you're Drew Brees at home in the Superdome NFC Championship, you have to go down and score a touchdown there. You can't do anything else, and you really can't afford to throw an interception and then give the ball to the Los Angeles Rams, who just need points to win. And so Greg the Leg comes up from about 90 yards and boots it through. I think it was 57, and the Rams are on to the Super Bowl.
The Saints had it coming in that game. Drew Brees was throwing it up for grabs repeatedly at the end of the game. So that was maybe the worst thing about that pass interference that was not called, is that totally could have been intercepted and taken back for a touchdown if he would have been looking at the ball.
Yeah.
But even before that, on the long Ted Ginn completion to get him down there, that ball hung in the air forever. And the Saints,
I was like, how
the
does
Rams
this
safety
not
just froze and didn't get it. But then the third time, Brees, he was pressured by Dante Fowler on the interception in overtime. But, he just chucks it up and, he tested his luck too many times. So the Saints also early should have been way farther ahead than 13-0. Yeah. And when you don't fit, as we seen numerous times with the Patriots on this side of the coin, when you don't finish off a good team, when you have the chance, they're going to come back and bite you, and that's what the Rams did.
Well, yeah, the Saints started out, it was 6-0, so 2 trips to the red zone, no touchdowns to show for it, so you can't do that against...
One of them, they started inside the 25 after a Rams fumble,
Well, let's tie this
or interception,
So let's tie this a little bit with actually relating to UGA. Now the narrative is, and it shifts to Todd Gurley versus Sony Michel, running back you here at UGA, and now they have 2 of their latest greats to come through the program here, and now they're going to face off in the Super Bowl. As far as I assume that's going to be the narrative surrounding a lot of UGA fans. Maybe now the narrative for now is, or the big picture wise, is Rams versus Tom Brady again, the team that Tom Brady faced to kick off his dynasty. But for Todd Gurley, he didn't have exactly the greatest of games in that game. They interviewed him afterwards, and he was just saying it was how it was about his teammates picking him up. But on the other end, in Kansas City, Sony Michel's going off, and he's continuing this form he's hit in the past 2 playoff games. But as far as for running back, what UGA is and what they call themselves, to see this and see these 2 top running backs in the Super Bowl, what does that do for the team recruiting wise? I mean, does that solidify it even more if we had any doubts who it was? I'm not saying that there were any doubts whatsoever of who running back you was, but what's that do for recruiting wise? You got recruits texting or tweeting throughout the games too, saying, yo, look at this, look what UGA did, and these running backs now in the Super Bowl.
Obviously, it's a great recruiting tool, and that just solidifies their claim to being RBU, but, it's pretty expected. I think these are blue-chip guys who also play for blue-chip coaches in great systems. Let's call it what it is. The Rams did not win the NFC Championship game because of Todd Gurley's 10 rushing yards, and the Patriots did not. Sony Michel was great. I'd say he is a critical piece of the puzzle there. He is not what carried them. Yeah, it's cool to see, but part of it is both of those guys went to the right situation. And it's not to say they're not great players, but, it's not like we got Georgia running backs carrying entire NFL teams to the Super Bowl on their backs. Michel had a great year, but the Patriots have had they put running backs in position to succeed, and it's been, and they need that to win. The last time they won a Super Bowl was the year LeGarrette Blount went over 1,100 yards and had 18 rushing touchdowns. They need that element. Yeah. Michel gives that to them. So I see him as kind of like that added piece to Tom Brady's offense that could take him there, and I think how him and just the Patriots running game performs in the Super Bowl will maybe decide it. And then the Rams obviously are going to need more from Todd Gurley. So those two guys, while I just said that they're not the reason they didn't carry their teams to the Super Bowl, they might be the most important players in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I agree with you on how they didn't carry their teams to the Super Bowl, but at the same time, they both had really successful seasons. You look at the regular season, nobody expected this out of Sony Michel, rookie out of Georgia. And then Todd Gurley, I mean, yeah, he's been good. Everybody knows he's the real deal. But, again, he put on another clinic out in Los Angeles this year, and for a while was in that MVP conversation before he got kind of hurt down the stretch in limited minutes when the Rams started to lock things up. And so I think this is a great look for Georgia, and kind of that in the past decade or so, the amount of talent that they've developed in such close proximity to each other. Maybe it takes away, Quentin mentioned they were on the same team here, along with Nick Chubb. All three of those guys on the roster, all three had a successful year in the National Football League. So I think maybe if you're a recruit, they can say, hey, I can go to a place like Georgia where there are other great running backs already there in the system. Maybe I'm not the number one guy that gets 30 carries a game. Maybe you're splitting it with someone else, getting 15 to 20 a game. But those guys are coming out fresh, and this has proven that multiple star backs can be on one college roster and go on to have continued success. And so I think it helps in recruiting great guys to come play together and say, hey, let's try and get one in college, and then we can go do our thing. Maybe like these two, meet for the grand prize in the NFL.
They say you want to play together, in my opinion, if you're great running backs, so you can stay fresh. You don't want to use up all your miles in college. You don't want to blow the tires early before you can make some money. So yeah, all three of those guys were great this year. It'll be of great interest to me to see if Sony and Nick Chubb can continue it, because Gurley is special in that regard, where a lot of running backs have trouble sustaining success as you get older.
Well, even Gurley's facing some injuries this year too, and it's just more than anything with the position itself, his career. But as far as like full circle, kind of even for Sony though, last game, national championship game against Alabama in 2017. That's his last college game ever. Then now, a year later, able to go into another championship game in the NFL. Same stadium.
Yeah, same stadium.
Mine's already ready just to say it. He's back in Mercedes-Benz. As far as what's the story, I mean, for how cool of a story is that for you guys? And as far as now that it's here in Atlanta, isn't it a little bit fitting that it almost, 50 miles from Athens? Well, I don't know the approximate distance wise, but where both these running backs are meeting now.
I said last week the Falcons fans' nightmares were going to come true with the Saints-Patriots Super Bowl. I don't know if this is like the dream scenario because it's the Patriots are there and the demons of Super Bowl 51 will be present, but I think this is a decent consolation prize for Georgia area football fans to see these two guys in there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that maybe you get a little bit of petty arguing back and forth between kind of people that don't have a rooting interest for one of the teams in the game, but have ties to Georgia. Maybe that's how they decided. Hey, I was in school when Todd Gurley was there, so I'm going to go for the Rams in this one. Or no, I just graduated in 2017. It's all Sony and Chubb for me, so I've got the Pats because of Sony Michel. So I think this sparks a little bit of maybe friendly banter, friendly debate within the Georgia fan base, and like Colin said, in Atlanta, there's a lot of people that bleed red and black, whether it's the Falcons, Atlanta United, or the Georgia Bulldogs. And this is going to be fun to see for them. It'll be fun for those two guys, I think, coming back kind of close to where they played collegiately. Both of them have great ties back to the area. And so it'll be fun. I'm sure the media will be all over it, especially local media in Atlanta, getting that story out and kind of on the wires. And it'll be exciting to see. Those two guys are friends. They're on the same team together. And so kind of like Colin said, for the brand of RBU, great to see if you're here, if you're on the coaching staff. For the fan base, it's a pretty good consolation prize to having the Pats come to your city if you're a Falcons fan.
Oh, yeah, well, then the narrative of it all, and I think that'll give a little bit more story other than the Pats being in it for 3 years in a row. So, at this point, you kind of have to stretch and find a little bit more. So I guess that's where the Rams versus Tom Brady again comes into play. But as far as you guys, are you guys planning on being around the Super Bowl and Super Bowl Sunday, like around the stadium at all? Planning on going down? No, you don't want to.
Probably I'll be here. I'll stay away from the traffic, but
I don't know, man. I'm kind of
my thing. I want to go,
but that's my way.
Well, no, that's the exact same thing. I want to go, but I know that traffic around the ATL is already bad enough as it is, and then with the influx of all these different corporate sponsors and ticket holders, and Radio Row's going to be there, and so just the millions of, maybe not millions, but just the hundreds of thousands of extra bodies that will bring into the greater Atlanta area.
Yep.
I don't know, traffic would be kind of tough, but maybe one day it can try and sneak out there. I think it'd be kind of cool to go experience it and just see what it's like out there at the Super Bowl. But it'll definitely be great, I think, for the city, just getting the big game to come there. College football playoff last year, Super Bowl this year, the Final Four next year, I believe a playoff game in the college football playoff next year as well. So great stuff there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Hopping place. So, well, that's in all the NFL playoffs. We'll have Super Bowl picks coming next. Was it next week or 2 weeks?
We'll have Super Bowl picks next week. We'll break down the game some more, but yeah, I think it's an intriguing matchup. I think this is a good thing for Atlanta to get this Super Bowl, because I think this is, I'll just leave it at this, I think this will define an era of the NFL, this Super Bowl, I think.
Really?
Will it be the continuation of the second or third phase of the Patriots dynasty, or will it be the beginning of Sean McVay living up to all this hype that he's built?
I gotcha. Well, all right. Well, switching back a little bit more to teams playing in Athens, and so we're talking with other sports kicking off last week. We were really only with women's basketball, men's basketball, gymnastics, but now all these other sports are coming into in full effect, full swing. I know men's tennis kicked off this past weekend in Atlanta at the MLK Invitational, and women's tennis is coming up, and we got tons of other sports, baseball, track and field going. So as far as with the sports to watch, the ones that aren't going right now, we're going to go through and break down which ones we're excited to really, or we're thinking are going to really make some noise come full springtime, a little bit on in a month time. But for start us off, Colin, who do you got is the ones to make some noise?
Say making noise or just being super interesting.
Super
Either
interesting.
way,
Yeah.
The men's tennis team is super interesting to me. Say, I covered them 2 seasons ago, and they went to the Final Four. That was their second consecutive Final Four appearance. And then heading into last year, they brought back every player from a Final Four team, and they did not live up to Georgia's tennis expectations at all. Georgia's men's tennis program is one of the best in the country. Manny Diaz is a legendary coach, and last year they brought back every player from a Final Four team, expected to be right there in the national championship picture. They went 13-11 and 5-7 in SEC play, and they had an early exit in the NCAA tournament. They also, after the season, had a player dismissed, Nathan Ponwith, one of their better players, is no longer here. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they bounce back. At the end of that season 2 years ago, that Final Four run, they were hitting with a scandal. There's a drug scandal. They made a change at the associate head coaching position. And yeah, let's see if they can get that luster back, because it kind of felt like since then they made that great Final Four run. They were the 13 seed in that tournament, I believe. They made the run of the Final Four. They upset 2 teams that had handled
Final
them.
Four here in Athens.
It was right here in Athens. And they made a great run, and they brought back all the personnel. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out last year. So this season, you've still got a lot of that core left in that senior class with Jan Zielinski, Walker Duncan, Emil Reinberg. This should be a good tennis team. But you'll kind of get to see which year was the fluke. Was it the Final Four run, or was it last year's just up and down disappointment of a year? My conventional wisdom would say that last season was the fluke. Because 2 years ago they went to the Final Four.
Well,
and then this senior class's freshman year they went to the Final Four.
Yeah.
And this program has the history of consistently being great. I think it would seem they have the talent to get back to that level, but it's hard to make sense of what happened last year. So I'm really interested to see, will they bounce back to playing up to their standard? I think they will, but it's worth giving.
Well, they got a lot of young guys. Well, last year with when Colin's given it was the change of power, I guess. Colin goes 2 years ago, and then I was last year covering the beat, and then even in the fall, that was the biggest thing. Is when I'm starting the beat, Colin's like, this is how scoring is, explaining everything at the college level, a little bit different compared to what you're seeing at Wimbledon and these big majors. But as far as for like when covering it, that was the biggest thing with also Paul Osterbahn. He left middle of the season and kind of left this team kind of lacking depth last year. That was the biggest thing. One person's out, and then you're
dealt with some injuries last year.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. But now with the main thing in the fall that I was looking for was one of their main guys was Walker Duncan, and he'd been battling a back injury, and now it seems to be, or at least what it looked like from Saturday and this past weekend, was that Walker was back and playing at least a little bit of doubles, I believe, is what he was playing. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not. And then they have these, I believe it's 4 new guys coming in. At least three freshmen that were here, and then another, I forget his name, is joining in on. They came in here for this semester, so it'll be interesting to see men's tennis as far as what they're capable of doing. For me, I'm personally looking at. I'm interested in the track and field team coming off of the men's team coming off of the national championship, and then the women's team and outdoor season, and then the women's team winning their national championship in the indoor season. And just whether or not I covered the track and field beat as well last spring. And just talking to Petros, head coach for him, and he was saying the toughest part has been just getting that first one. He's talking about with Jack Bowerly, the swimming and diving coach, who has all these national championships tallying up at this point, and he's asking him, he's like, how do you get that first one? And he said, well, to be honest, like, the first one's, he said something to the extent of the first one's really the hardest, and then after that you find the system, you go in. So I'm interested to see whether or not one of those teams can really continue that and really make some noise. But mine, who's your team to watch or that you're interested in?
So I'm looking at the 2 diamond sports, baseball and softball. I'll get into baseball a little bit this week. Last year, a phenomenal season that exceeded expectations with an incredibly disappointing end. Georgia finished 39-21 on the year, 25-8 at home, hosted a regional. You've got to be a top 16 national seed to host a regional. The Bulldogs checked in at number 9 overall. And then in a double elimination tournament, went 2-0 to start, needed 1 win against Duke in the final day to advance to the Super Regionals, and got swept by the Blue Devils twice at Foley Field in the postseason. That can't happen if you're Scott Strickland, but still before that, a great season to get to that point. Pitching coach Sean Kenny, I think, made a big difference for the Dogs last year. He came in, and one thing that he really preached about was winning those midweek games. That's going to make the difference. Georgia last year, those Tuesday, Wednesday games, won most of them. Had a good stretch where they won 6 or 7 midweek games in a row against formidable opponents like Clemson, where they swept the Tigers last season. And so I think that if Georgia can hold on to winning those midweek games, it really boosts the records. It boosts the RPI, which is a great kind of tool that the NCAA baseball uses to rank teams now. And checking in kind of in a couple different spots in the preseason rankings. D1Baseball.com has Georgia at number 9. Which I think, I don't know if that's a fair assessment or not. I think it might be a little high given the talent that the Bulldogs have lost. But then Baseball America comes in, has them at 15 overall to start the season, which I think is a little more fair, a little more accurate, because looking at the stats from last year, the top 3 players offensively, Michael Curry, Keegan McGovern, and Adam Sasser, all batting .317 or higher, are all gone. Curry and McGovern gone to play professional baseball. They were drafted, so they're out in the big leagues, in the farm systems, and Adam Sasser was dismissed after an incident during the football season. So then you've got Tucker Bradley on down to see if they can still kind of fuel the offense. And then the pitching staff is the big question. Yeah. Will Tony Losey finally have the year that everybody has expected him to have since he's come out of high school? Losey's got electric stuff. He can run it up to 96, 97 miles per hour, but the control hasn't been there, so he has to dial it down to the 93 to 95 range. And he's become kind of a midweek guy when he's who you want on the mound in those big SEC contests. Aaron Schunk, great season last year at third base and also at closer. Is he going to be able to produce at that hybrid role at the same level this year? Emerson Hancock, young arm last year, great starter, great weapon for the bullpens. Will he be able to turn in a successful sophomore campaign? The list goes on and on. So I think the foundation is there, but the question marks come in that was last year a fluke? Kind of like what Colin said about men's tennis. Last year, in recent history, felt like the fluke season. But is this the start of a change for Georgia baseball? I don't know. We'll find out.
It'll be interesting just with almost half their offense leaving for the
Yeah.
draft. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we got for you guys this week as far as our teams to watch in the future are coming up, so here soon. But we'll have this up on SoundCloud, have it on iTunes, have it anywhere else that you can imagine that you can find it and listen to it. We'd love to have you guys subscribe to our YouTube channels for press conferences, interviews, and more video coverage on all UGA sports. We got that coming up. And then as tomorrow is our every week where we got the Red and Black in rotation. Pick up a copy of the Red and Black tomorrow at the Red Bins. You see throughout the campus. We'll give it, and then you can check out all of our stories at www.redandblack.com to read daily stories, anything, any news. We're bringing it live to you. But as always, thanks for listening, guys, and see you next week.